Kentucky U.S. Senator Rand Paul is trying to turn the tide ahead of a possible presidential run. He took part in a community conversation in West Louisville this afternoon. One concern raised was restoring voting rights to convicted felons. Leaders asked if he could intervene on the state level.
And I'm going to talk with leadership in the Senate. Apparently it's passed in the House before, but not in the Senate. I'm going to talk with leadership in the Senate and see what their objection to it is. And one of the compromises I threw out is maybe instead of immediate restoration that you have to wait a couple of years to show and no convictions for a few years. My initial idea was 5 years. Some here didn't like 5 years. Maybe there's some waiting period that would convince people in the Senate to vote for this.
Paul is considering a run for president in 2016. Earlier this year, he visited Simmons College and Howard University, trying to convince more African Americans to vote Republican.
Good evening and thank you for joining us at 5:30. I'm Dawn G.
And I'm Janelle McDonald. U.S. Senator Rand Paul spent part of the day in West Louisville to talk about problems plaguing that community.
Wave 3 News reporter Cedra Mayfield sat in on the conversation as she explained several of the topics that were on the table at the Plymouth Community Renewal Center.
The sit-down session with Senator Rand Paul consisted of not only pinpointing key issues here in West Louisville, but also the steps necessary for solutions. For Reverend Alonzo Malone, it was a chance to appeal for voting rights.
Today I can pay taxes, but I can't vote.
For Sean Gardner,
when you see those parents on that school bus because they chaperone the trip, Sean Gardner would never be one of those parents.
It was an opportunity to advocate for program funding to help keep teens in West Louisville from making the same mistakes he has.
Once you get that felony, it's there for your life.
Both men, community leaders, and also convicted felons, invited to take part in the table discussion hosted by U.S. Senator Rand Paul.
The chance that a young black man is going to be in jail for drugs is 4 to 5 times greater than a white person, even though white people are 85% of the public and are said to use drugs. The thing, you look at it this way, where are they more likely to go? To the rich high school on the other side of the town, or to a high school here and stand outside for those loitering out front?
The senator also acknowledged a community concern for tax liens being sold to third parties.
A $50 tax lien becomes a $500 lien, becomes a $2,000 lien.
As well as the need for what he called economic freedom zones.
Zones of improvement where taxes would be lowered to try to encourage business.
During the sit-down session, neighbors chimed in freely, some concerned the senator would not be able to provide direct help.
A lot of the things you can't do anything about, Senator Paul, because you're at the federal level, and a lot of our issues we've discussed in our local and state.
Others applauded Senator Paul's presence, grateful he took time out to listen.
I have my opinions and he answered them, so I feel good about it.
Thanks everybody for coming and keep talking to us.
The meeting ended with a call to action. Senator Paul says he plans to testify on altering minimum sentencing requirements later this week. In West Louisville, Cedra Mayfield, Wave 3 News.
U.S. Senator Rand Paul making the case today for several issues in West Louisville. Rand Paul wants to remove the tax burden for businesses to relocate there and prevent people from being victimized when a tax lien against their property is resold. And as WHAS 11's political editor Joe Arnold tells us tonight, Paul wants to give a second chance to drug offenders.
The statistics show that this is racially directed in the sense.
As Rand Paul works to broaden the Republican base to include more African American voters, he's working to increase the number of African Americans who are eligible to vote.
We have people in jail for life for nonviolent drug crimes. I think this is a crime in and of itself.
Ahead of his Capitol Hill testimony later this week against mandatory minimum federal drug sentences, Paul heard from 2 Kentuckians struggling to overcome lifelong repercussions of felony convictions.
You know that once they do that background, you're not going to be able to volunteer.
Make a way for addicts and convicted felons that are trying to do better in their life, that want better and you know, can better themselves with help.
Paul is working on legislation that would not only restore voting rights to those convicted of nonviolent felonies, but the right to own and carry a gun.
I am in favor of letting people get their rights back, the right to vote, the right to Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment, all your rights to come back.
Paul backed up his argument for leniency after nonviolent drug offenses by young men by saying that boys really don't have much of a brain until they're 25. At the Plymouth Community Renewal Center, Joe Arnold, WHAS 11 News.